The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched upward like the inside of a cathedral, its walls made of crystal that caught light from 1,000 floating orbs. Representatives from 47 different species sat in tiered seats that curved around a central floor, their bodies ranging from the familiar to the bizarre. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some had 2 eyes, others had dozens. But all of them watched as the small group of humans walked into the chamber. Ambassador Claire Dawson led the human delegation with steady steps. She was a woman of 53 years, with gray hair cut short and practical, and eyes that had seen too many negotiations to be impressed by fancy architecture. Behind her walked Daniel Porter, her young aide who carried a data tablet and tried not to stare at the aliens surrounding them. Hi, Arbiter Zethral descended from his elevated seat to stand before the humans. He was tall, nearly 8 feet, with scales that shifted colors as he moved. His species, the Kathrani, had ruled the council for 300 years, and Zethral himself had held his position for 60 of those years. He was not used to being challenged. Humanity, he said, and his voice filled the chamber without effort. You have been part of the galactic community for 3 of our standard cycles. In that time, you have expanded faster than any species in recorded history. Claire kept her expression neutral. We are an ambitious people. Ambitious. Zethral made a sound that the translator rendered as something between a laugh and a growl. That is one word for it. In 3 cycles, you have claimed 17 star systems. You have built a fleet that rivals species with thousands of years of development. You have created weapons that our scientists struggle to understand. We like to keep busy, Claire said. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. The Vorsani representative, creature that looked like a giant jellyfish suspended in a hovering tank of liquid, flashed angry colors. The Mithrani delegate, a being of graceful limbs and silver skin, leaned forward with obvious interest. Nethrel raised one clawed hand, and a holographic display appeared in the air between them. It showed a map of the galaxy, with human territory marked in red against the blue expanse of council space. The red area was small compared to the blue, but it was growing. The council has discussed your situation at length, Zethral continued. We have reached a decision. For the good of galactic stability, humanity will comply with the following demands. Claire felt Daniel tense beside her, but she kept her own body relaxed. She had expected something like this. First, you will surrender 70% of your colonial holdings to council administration. Second, you will provide complete technical data on your propulsion systems, specifically the technology you call the jump drive. Third, you will reduce your military fleet by 80%, with the removed vessels to be scrapped under council supervision. Fourth, you will pay tribute in resources, the amount to be determined by this body. The chamber was silent. Every eye, every sensor, every attention was fixed on the small group of humans standing alone on the floor. Claire took a breath. She thought about the message she had received from Earth before leaving. The words of Secretary General Maria Santos, find out what they want, but remember who we are. Those are significant demands, Claire said carefully. May I ask what happens if we choose not to comply? Zethrel's scales shifted to a darker shade. The full military force of the Galactic Council will ensure compliance. 47 species, united in purpose. 12,000 capital ships. Resources beyond your imagination. He leaned closer, his reptilian eyes fixed on Claire's human ones. You cannot stand against us. No one can. Claire nodded slowly, as if considering his words. Around her, the delegates watched with a mixture of anticipation and what might have been pity. They had seen this before. Young species, full of fire and ambition, confronted with the reality of council power, they always submitted in the end. You have given us 30 standard rotations to respond, Zethral said. I suggest you use that time wisely. Consult with your leaders. Accept the inevitable. The session is concluded. He turned to walk back to his seat, clearly expecting the humans to leave in defeat. Hi, Arbiter. Claire's voice was not loud, but something in it made Zethral stop. He turned back, his scales now showing confusion. I will carry your demands to Earth, Claire said, and we will give you our answer in 30 days. But I want you to understand something. She took a step forward, and though she was less than half his height, she somehow did not seem smaller. Humanity has a long memory. We remember everyone who has ever threatened us. We remember everyone who has ever tried to take what is ours. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the chamber, touching every delegate. Every species that had voted to support this ultimatum. You should have done your research, she said quietly. You should have learned what happens when humanity is backed into a corner. We don't surrender. We don't submit. We find another way. And those who push us. She smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. They tend to regret it. She turned and walked toward the chamber exit, Daniel hurrying to keep up. Behind her, Zethrel's scales had gone pale. He told himself it was nothing. Humans were young, emotional, prone to dramatic statements. They would learn. But as the doors closed, behind the human delegation, a small part of him wondered if perhaps the council had made a mistake. Outside the chamber, Daniel finally let out the breath he had been holding. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen, he said, or the most insane. Claire kept walking, her heels clicking on the crystal floor. Maybe both. Get a message to Admiral Shaw. Tell him to begin preparations. For what? Claire glanced back at the doors that separated them from the most powerful political body in the galaxy. For whatever comes next. The council thinks they know what humans are capable of. They think because we're young and small, we'll break easily. She shook her head. They don't understand that we've been preparing for something like this since the first human looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there as they left the station and boarded their ship for the long journey home. Claire allowed herself one moment of doubt. The council was vast, powerful, ancient. Humanity was none of those things. But humanity had something the council had forgotten how to have. Hunger. The hunger to survive, to grow, to prove that they belonged among the stars. It was the same hunger that had driven them out of caves and across, oceans, and finally into space. The council wanted to crush that hunger. They would learn that some fires only burned brighter when someone tried to put them out. Claire sat in her cabin as the ship jumped toward Earth, already composing her report in her head. 30 days. Not much time to prepare for a war against the galaxy, but for humans. It would have to be enough. Admiral Kevin Shaw stood in the command center, buried deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon. Around him, screens displayed information from every corner of human space. Fleet positions, production numbers, resource allocations. The numbers were not good. Tell me again, he said to Commander Lisa Grant, who stood at the main tactical display. Lisa pulled up the data. Council combined fleet, approximately 12,000 capital ships, 40,000 support vessels. They have manufacturing capacity in over 300 systems. She paused. Our fleet consists of 800 capital ships and 2,000 support craft. We have manufacturing in 17 systems. So we're outgunned 15-1, at minimum. Kevin nodded slowly. He was 61 years old, a career military man who had never expected to fight a war against the entire galaxy. But life had a way of surprising people. Good thing we're not planning to fight fair, he said. Across human space, preparations were already underway. The message from Ambassador Dawson had arrived 3 days ago, and in that time, humanity had begun to transform. On Earth, the great shipyards of orbit worked around the clock. Workers who had been building cargo vessels now assembled warships. Engineers who had been designing colony infrastructure now created weapons. Everyone knew what was coming, and everyone wanted to help. In the asteroid belt, mining operations doubled their output. Metals and rare elements flowed toward manufacturing centers like blood toward a heart. Every ship, every station, every habitat contributed what it could. But the most important work was happening on Mars. Dr. Patricia Vance had not slept in 40 hours. She stood in a laboratory filled with equipment that hummed with barely contained energy. Watching as her team made final adjustments to the device at the center of the room, it was not large. Perhaps 10 feet long and 5 feet wide, shaped like a cylinder with complex patterns etched into its surface. Looking at it, one would never guess what it could do. Status. Patricia asked her assistant, a young man named Gregory Cole, checked his readings. All systems nominal. Power reserves at maximum. Targeting matrix calibrated. In the simulations. Gregory hesitated. The simulations show it will work as designed. A single shot could destabilize a star's corona, releasing a wave of energy that would destroy anything within several light minutes. Patricia removed her glasses and rubbed her tired eyes. She had spent 20 years developing the theories behind this weapon. She had never actually wanted to build it. Has anyone tested it at full power? Asked General Raymond Cole, who had arrived at MO. Arning from Earth. He was Gregory's uncle, though the two rarely spoke outside of official business, Patricia said. Testing it would require destroying a star. We've run thousands of simulations, but actual testing. She shook her head. This is either our greatest achievement or our greatest mistake. Raymond looked at the device. He was a practical man, not given to philosophy. But even he felt the weight of what they had created. Let's hope we never have to use it, he said, on the other side of Mars. In the military complex of Olympus Base, Admiral Shaw was meeting with his senior officers via a holographic conference. Faces flickered in the air around him, commanders from across human space. The Council expects us to meet them in traditional fleet combat, Kevin said. Ships lined up against ships, the bigger force winning through numbers. That's how galactic warfare has worked for millennia. Captain Nathan Brooks, commanding the carrier Defiance, leaned forward. He was young for his rank, only 38, but he had a reputation for creative thinking. So we don't fight traditionally, exactly. Kevin activated a display showing the human fleet's proposed deployment. Our advantage is the jump drive. Every other species uses stable warp corridors for faster-than-light travel. They're fast, but predictable. You can only enter and exit at specific points. Our drives let us jump anywhere, said Commander Grant. In and out in seconds. No fixed entry points, which means we can fight asymmetrically. Kevin highlighted several points on the display. Small ships, fast ships, appearing and disappearing before they can target us. We hit their supply lines, their fuel depots, their command ships. We make them chase ghosts while we pick them apart, Captain Brooks smiled. Like wolves hunting a herd. Never attack the whole group, just keep taking individuals until the herd breaks. That's the idea. Kevin looked around at his officers. We can't win a straight fight, but we don't have to. We just have to make them realize that fighting us costs more than leaving us alone. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the political preparations were just as intense. Secretary General Maria Santos met with Ambassador Dawson in a secure room beneath the United Nations building. Outside, the world continued its daily business, most people unaware of how close they were to war. The colonies are ready, Claire reported. Defense grids active, evacuation plans in place. If the Council attacks civilian targets, we can move populations to protected zones within hours. Maria nodded. She was a small woman, but she carried authority like a cloak. In the diplomatic situation, I've reached out to several Council species privately. The Mithrani are sympathetic, but afraid to act openly. The Dorval are interested in trade relationships regardless of Council politics. A few others are watching to see what happens. Will any of them help us? Claire shook her head. Not directly. But if we can show strength, if we can prove we're not easy targets, some of them might reconsider their positions. The Council only holds together because everyone believes resistance is impossible. Then we have to show them it's not. Maria stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. You know, when I was a girl, my grandmother used to tell me stories about our ancestors. How they crossed oceans in wooden boats, not knowing what they would find. How they built cities in deserts and jungles and frozen wastelands. How they survived everything the world threw at them. She turned back to Claire. We're the children of people who refuse to quit. Every human alive today carries that inheritance. The Council looks at our numbers and sees weakness. They should look at our history and see something else entirely. Claire nodded. What should they see? Maria smiled, and there was something fierce in it. They should see a species that has been fighting for survival since the day we climbed down from the trees. They should see people who turned every challenge into an opportunity. They should see a civilization that reached the stars not because it was easy, but because we refused to accept that it was impossible. She sat back down and folded her hands. In 30 days, the Council will expect our surrender. Instead, we're going to show them what humanity is made of. Across human space, preparations continued. Ships were armed. Defenses were raised. Weapons of terrible power were readied, and in the quiet moments between work, humans looked up at the stars and wondered what was coming. 25 days remained. The deadline came and went without a human response. High Arbiter Zethral waited one additional day, expecting a last-minute message of surrender. When none came, he gave the order. Admiral Zorvith of the Kethrani was chosen to lead the enforcement fleet. He was considered one of the finest military minds in the galaxy, a veteran of dozens of campaigns against rebellious species. He had studied human history extensively during the journey to the staging area, and he felt confident in his assessment. They will fight, he told his officers aboard his flagship, the Dominion. Humans are stubborn creatures, prone to emotional responses, but they are also practical. Once they see the size of our fleet, once they experience what true galactic power looks like, they will negotiate. The fleet that assembled at the edge of human space was enormous. 3,000 capital ships from 7 different species, along with support vessels, supply craft, and troop transports. It was the largest military force assembled in a century, enough firepower to crack planets. Their target was the Kepler 442 system, humanity's outermost colony. Intelligence reports indicated it was lightly defended, with only a small civilian population. A perfect first target to demonstrate Council resolve as the fleet entered the system. Zorvith stood on the bridge of the Dominion and watched the tactical display. The colony world appeared before them, a blue-green sphere similar to Earth itself. "Scan for defenses," he ordered. His sensor officer, a young Kethrani named Thelrak, ran the scans. Minimal orbital presence. No visible defense platforms. No fleet formations detected. Zorveth allowed himself a small feeling of satisfaction. As expected, the humans had abandoned their outer colonies to consolidate their defenses closer to Earth. A sensible strategy, though ultimately futile. "Move the fleet into orbital position," he commanded. "Prepare to deploy ground forces." The massive armada began to advance. 3,000 ships moving in perfect formation. A display of overwhelming power designed to crush any thought of resistance. Then the stars began to flicker. Selrax's scales went pale as his instruments screamed warnings. "Admiral, we have contacts." Multiple contacts appearing throughout the system. "How many?" "I'm counting ... hundreds? No, thousands." The young officer looked up, fear plain on his face. "They're everywhere." From the darkness of space, ships emerged. But these were not the heavy cruisers and carriers that Council intelligence had expected. These were smaller vessels, sleek and angular, built for speed rather than brute force. They appeared in flashes of distorted light, dozens at a time, surrounding the Council fleet like a swarm of insects around a wounded animal. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Nathan Brooks watched the enemy fleet with calm eyes. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, every person knowing exactly what they needed to do. "All ships in position," reported his tactical officer. Nathan opened a communication channel that would broadcast to the entire system. "Council Fleet, this is Captain Nathan Brooks of the Earth Defense Force. You have entered sovereign human territory without authorization. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be escorted out of our space." Aboard the Dominion, Zorvith heard the message and felt his confidence waver for the first time. Where had these ships come from? How had they appeared so quickly, with no warning? But he was a veteran of many campaigns. He had faced unexpected situations before. All ships, he commanded, opened fire. The Council fleet unleashed its weapons. Plasma beams, kinetic rounds, and energy missiles filled the space between the two forces. It was enough firepower to devastate a planet, enough destruction to annihilate any normal enemy. But the human ships were not there to receive it, as the weapons fire approached. the human vessels simply vanished. They blinked out of existence, reappearing moments later in completely different positions. Some appeared behind council ships, their own weapons already firing. Others emerged directly alongside enemy vessels, so close that the larger ships could not bring their main guns to bear. It was chaos. The council fleet, trained for centuries in the methodical warfare of fixed warp corridors and predictable engagement zones, could not adapt. They fired at positions where human ships had been, only to find them already gone. Their formation, their numerical advantage, their overwhelming firepower, all of it was useless against an enemy that refused to stay still. Nathan Brooks guided his ship through the battle with the focus of a surgeon. Jump to coordinates 774. Target their command structure. The Defiance vanished and reappeared directly above the Dominion, close enough that the massive flagship filled the view screen. Before Zorvith could react, the human carrier fired a precise burst into the Kathrani ship's engine section. "Their engines are disabled," reported the tactical officer. "Good jump away before they can respond. Target the next ship." The battle lasted for hours, though to Zorvith it felt like an eternity. He watched his fleet torn apart, piece by piece, unable to land a single effective counterattack. The humans fought like nothing he had ever seen, like predators playing with prey, like water flowing around rocks. When it was over, 2,000 council ships had been destroyed or disabled. The rest were scattered, their formations broken, their morale shattered. Human losses were 73 vessels. Zorvith sat in his command chair, his flagship drifting without power, and tried to understand what had happened. His entire military education, everything he had learned about warfare over 60 years of service, had been rendered worthless in a single afternoon. A communication request appeared on his damaged screens. He accepted it. Captain Nathan Brooks looked out at him from the display. The human was young, impossibly young by Kathrani standards, but his eyes held no doubt, no hesitation. "Admiral Zorvith," Nathan said, his voice calm and professional. "Your fleet is defeated. We are prepared to allow your surviving ships to withdraw from this system. Your wounded will be collected and returned to council space." Zorvith, as translator, struggled with his response. You fight without honor, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. "This is not warfare," Nathan raised an eyebrow. "With respect, Admiral, you came here to conquer our homes. You didn't come to fight a war, you came to deliver an execution. We simply declined to cooperate. Council will send more ships. 100 fleets. Then we will defeat 100 fleets." Nathan's expression did not change. "But that doesn't have to happen. Tell High Arbiter Zethrel what you saw here today. Tell him that humanity is not prey. Tell him that the next fleet he sends won't be allowed to retreat." The communication ended. In the hours that followed, the surviving council ships limped out of the system, carrying their wounded and their stories. Behind them, the human fleet watched in silence, making no move to pursue. On the colony world below, people emerged from their shelters and looked up at the sky. They had been told to prepare for occupation, for surrender. Instead, they had witnessed a victory. Word of the battle spread faster than any ship could travel. In cantinas and council chambers across the galaxy, beings of every species heard the impossible news. Humanity had faced the council's enforcement fleet, and one something had changed. Everyone could feel it. The tremors had begun. The news of Kepler 442 reached Nexus Prime before Admiral Zorvith's wounded fleet limped home. It traveled through communication networks and trade routes, whispered in meeting halls, and shouted in public squares. By the time High Arbiter Zethrel convened an emergency session of the Galactic Council, every species in known space had heard some version of the story. The chamber that had been so confident weeks ago now hummed with fear and anger. Delegates argued among themselves, their translators struggling to keep up with the overlapping accusations. "This is what happens when we show weakness," thundered the Vorthani representative, his gelatinous body pulsing with agitated colors. "We should have sent the full fleet. We should have destroyed their homeworld before they could respond. And how many ships would that have cost us?" demanded the Mithrani delegate, her silver skin reflecting the chamber's lights. We sent 3,000. 2,000 did not return. Is the council prepared to sacrifice 12,000 to achieve the same result? Zethril struck his staff against the floor, the sound cutting through the chaos. Enough. We did not convene to argue among ourselves. We convened to address the situation. He turned to face the doors as they opened, and the chamber fell silent. Ambassador Claire Dawson walked in alone. No aides this time, no delegation. Just one human woman in a dark suit, her gray hair swept back from a face that showed no fear. Ambassador Zethril said, and even his voice had lost some of its former confidence. You requested permission to address this body. I did. Claire walked to the center of the floor, the same spot where she had stood weeks ago to receive the council's ultimatum, and I thank the council for granting it. She turned slowly, looking at each delegation in turn. Some met her gaze. Others looked away. You tried to take everything from us, Claire began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Our colonies, our technology, our ships, our dignity. You looked at humanity and saw prey. You saw a young species, small in numbers, isolated from allies. You saw an easy target. She paused, letting the words settle. You were wrong. Divorce any. Representative pulsed angrily. You cheated. Your technology violates the principles of civilized warfare. You had no right to use such weapons against a council fleet. Claire turned to face him directly. There are no principles of civilized warfare. There is only warfare. You came to our space with 3,000 warships. You came to conquer our worlds and enslave our people. You don't get to complain about how we defended ourselves. She walked toward the Vorthani's tank, her footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. Let me tell you what humanity learned in our history. We learned that predators don't make rules to protect prey. They make rules to make hunting easier. Every treaty, every accord, every principle of civilized behavior in this chamber exists because it benefits the powerful at the expense of the weak. She turned away from the Vorthane and addressed the full council. You expected us to follow those rules? You expected us to line up our ships in neat formations and let you destroy them with your superior numbers. That's what every other species has done, isn't it? That's why you're so confident in your power. Because no one has ever fought back effectively. High Arbiter Zethril stepped forward. The Council has maintained peace for millennia. Our methods have brought stability to hundreds of systems. Your methods have brought submission, Claire corrected. You call it peace, but it's just quiet surrender. Species too afraid to resist, too broken to fight? She shook her head. Humanity is different. We've been fighting since before we had fire. We fought animals that wanted to eat us. We fought environments that wanted to kill us. We fought each other for resources and territory and ideas. Fighting is what we do. It's what we are. She reached into her pocket and produced a small device. When she activated it, a holographic display appeared, showing the human fleet as it had appeared at Kepler 442. These are the ships we use to defeat your enforcement fleet. Fast attack vessels, designed for hit-and-run warfare. Our main battle fleet never left port. Our planetary defense systems were never activated. The weapon we developed that could destabilize a star was never even loaded.
Yes.
Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Zethril's scales went pale. You sent 3,000 ships against what we consider disposable assets, Claire continued, and you lost. Badly. Now ask yourself, what happens if you send 12,000 ships against our real defenses? What happens if you push us to use the weapons we've kept in reserve? She deactivated the display and put the device away. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to offer you a chance to step back from the edge. Humanity doesn't want war. War is expensive and destructive and ultimately pointless. We want to trade, to learn, to grow alongside the other species of this galaxy. But we will not be threatened. We will not be extorted. And we will not surrender a single world, a single ship, or a single human life to satisfy your arrogance. The Mithrani delegate rose from her seat. Her people had always been voices of moderation on the council, often ignored by the more aggressive species. But now, with the memory of Kepler 442 fresh in everyone's minds, her words carried new weight. "The Council has made a mistake," she said. "We treated humanity as we have treated other young species, with demands and threats. We assumed they would respond as others have responded. We were wrong." She turned to face Zethral directly. "Perhaps it is time to consider a different approach." For a long moment no one spoke. The chamber that had been so quick to condemn humanity now hesitated, uncertain then. Slowly other voices joined Demithranes, the Dorval, a species of traders who cared more about commerce than conquest, the Selenari, whose homeworld bordered human space and who had no desire to be caught between two fighting powers. One by one, species that had supported the ultimatum began to reconsider. Zethral watched his coalition crumble. He was old enough to remember when the Council had been truly unified, when its word was law throughout the galaxy. But that unity had been built on fear, and now a new kind of fear was taking its place. "What do you want?" he finally asked Claire. She smiled, the first genuine smile she had shown since entering the chamber. "I want what we've always wanted. Recognition as equals. The right to control our own territory and our own destiny. Trade agreements with any species willing to negotiate in good faith. And a promise from the Council that there will be no more ultimatums, no more enforcement fleets, no more attempts to bully us into submission. You ask us to admit we were wrong? I'm asking you to be wise." Claire's voice softened slightly. "The galaxy is large enough for all of us. Humanity isn't trying to conquer anyone. We're just trying to survive and grow, same as every other species. We don't have to be enemies." She extended her hand, a human gesture of peace that the translator explained to the assembled aliens. "What do you say, High Arbiter? Are you ready to start over?" Zethral looked at her hand, then at the faces of his fellow council members. He saw fear, uncertainty, and something else. Relief, perhaps. Relief that someone was finally offering a way out of a conflict that no one truly wanted. He reached out with his own clawed hand and took hers. "We will negotiate," he said. The chamber erupted in sounds of approval from dozens of species, each expressing the emotion in their own way. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council had been forced to treat a younger species as an equal, and standing at the center of it all, one human woman allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The battle had been won. Now came the harder work of building a peace that could last. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, representatives from across the galaxy gathered on Nexus, prime for the signing of what would become known as the Treaty of Mutual Recognition. It was the most significant diplomatic event in centuries, and everyone knew it. The document itself was extensive, covering everything from territorial boundaries to trade regulations to military protocols. But its core message was simple. Humanity was now recognized as an equal member of the galactic community, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. Ambassador. Claire Dawson reviewed the final version one more time in her quarters aboard the diplomatic station. The words on the screen represented months of difficult negotiations, countless compromises, and more than a few moments when she had wondered if peace was even possible. "Second thoughts?" asked Daniel Porter, who had remained her aide throughout the process. "Just making sure I haven't missed anything." Claire scrolled through the document. "The territorial provisions look good. The Council has formally recognized all 17 of our colony systems, plus exclusive rights to expand into the unclaimed sectors between us and the Mithrani. What about the technology sharing agreements? Limited exchange programs with willing partners. We keep the jump drive specifications classified, but we've agreed to share some of our medical and agricultural advances." Claire smiled slightly. "The Dorval are very interested in our farming techniques, apparently. Something about our crop yields being significantly higher than galactic averages." Daniel shook his head in amazement. "We came here expecting a fight, and we're leaving with trade deals. That was always the goal."
Ow.
Claire closed the document. "War was just a means to an end. We didn't want to destroy the Council. We wanted them to respect us. Now they do." The signing ceremony took place in the Great Chamber where the ultimatum had first been delivered. The same crystal walls, the same tiered seating, the same assembled delegates from 47 species, but the atmosphere was completely different. High Arbiter Zethral presided over the ceremony. Though his role had been significantly reduced in the new order, the Council would continue to exist, but its power to issue ultimatums and enforce compliance had been formally limited. Never again would a younger species face the choice between submission and destruction. "We gather today to mark a new chapter in galactic history," Zethral began, his voice carrying through the chamber. "For too long, the Council has operated on principles of dominance and control. We believed that strength gave us the right to dictate to others. We were wrong." He turned to face the human delegation. "Humanity has shown us another way. They have shown us that true strength is not measured in ships or weapons, but in the courage to stand for what is right. They have shown us that peace built on fear is no peace at all." Claire rose from her seat and walked to the central platform where the treaty document waited. Behind her, a holographic display showed the document's text for all to see. "On behalf of the United Earth Government and all human colonies," she said, "I accept this treaty and the peace it represents. We did not come to the stars looking for enemies. We came looking for neighbors, for friends, for partners in the great work of understanding the universe we all share." She picked up the stylus and signed her name. The moment was captured by recording devices from every species present, broadcast across the galaxy to trillions of watching beings. When she finished, Zethral added his own signature, followed by representatives from each council species. One by one, they committed themselves to a new relationship with humanity, one based on respect rather than domination. In the celebration that followed, Claire found herself surrounded by beings she had once considered enemies. The Mithrani delegate, whose name translated roughly as Silvered Voice, was particularly warm. "You have accomplished something remarkable," Silvered Voice said, her translator rendering her melodic language into human speech, "not just for your species, but for all of us. The Council has needed this challenge for a long time. We just refused to accept the status quo," Claire replied. "Anyone could have done the same, but no one did. Until you." Silvered Voice tilted her head, a gesture that indicated deep respect in her culture. "My people will remember this. We will be good neighbors to humanity." Across the chamber, other conversations were taking place. Human officers mingled with their counterparts from species that had sent ships against them just months ago. Trade representatives discussed economic opportunities. Scientists exchanged research data. The enemies of yesterday were becoming the partners of tomorrow. On Earth, the signing was broadcast live to every screen on the planet. In cities and villages, in homes and offices, people watched their ambassadors sign humanity's name among the stars. Many cried. Some cheered. All felt the weight of the moment. Secretary General Maria Santos watched from her office in Geneva, surrounded by the leaders who had guided humanity through the crisis. Admiral Kevin Shaw was there, finally able to relax after months of constant vigilance. General Raymond Cole, who had overseen the development of weapons they had never needed to use. Dr. Patricia Vance, who had built the most terrible weapon in human history and was now discussing how to convert the technology to peaceful purposes. "We did it," Maria said quietly. "We actually did it." "The hard part is just beginning," Kevin warned. "Treaties are just words. Making them work takes constant effort." "I know," Maria smiled. "But at least now we have the chance. A year ago, we were facing conquest. Today, we're equal partners in galactic civilization." She turned to face the window, looking up at the stars that were now more accessible than ever. "You know what I keep thinking about? All those generations of humans who looked up at the sky and wondered what was out there? All those dreamers and scientists and explorers who worked their whole lives to get us into space. They never knew what we would find or how hard it would be, but they kept going anyway. That's what humans do," Patricia said. "We keep going." In the years that followed, humanity spread across the stars in ways the Council had never imagined. Not as conquerors, but as traders, explorers, diplomats, and friends. Human colonies became centers of commerce and culture. Attracting visitors from across the galaxy, Captain Nathan Brooks was promoted to admiral and given command of the expanded Earth Defense Force. He never had to fight another major battle, but his ships patrolled human space constantly. A reminder to anyone who might consider testing human resolve, Dr. Patricia Vance received countless awards for her scientific work. Though the weapon she had created was quietly dismantled, its components distributed to research facilities where they would be used for peaceful purposes. She always said that destroying the weapon was her proudest achievement. And Claire Dawson, the woman who had faced the Galactic Council alone and refused to blink, became the first human elected to serve on the council itself. Her acceptance speech was carried across the galaxy. "When we first came to the stars," she said, standing in the chamber where she had once been threatened with destruction, "we hoped to find friends. What we found instead was a test of our courage, our resolve, our willingness to stand up for ourselves. We passed that test." She looked out at the assembled delegates, beings from dozens of species who now listened to her with respect rather than contempt. "Now we have the chance to show the galaxy what else humanity can do. Not what we can destroy, but what we can build. Not what we can take, but what we can give. We are a young species with much to learn, but we have one gift to offer that no one else can provide: the reminder that even the smallest voice can change the universe. If it refuses to be silenced—" She paused, and her next words were broadcast to every corner of known space. "We are humanity. We came from a small blue world on the edge of the galaxy. We fought for our survival, and we won. Now we're ready to help build something greater. A galaxy where every species is respected, where strength is used to protect, not to dominate, where the future is something we create together." As she smiled. And in that smile was everything humanity had overcome and everything they hoped to achieve. Let's get started. The applause that followed echoed through the chamber for a very long time. It was the sound of a galaxy beginning to change, one species at a time, led by the people who had refused to surrender when everyone else expected them to fall. The tremors that humanity had sent through galactic civilization would be felt for generations. But they were no longer tremors of fear. They were tremors of hope, and that made all the difference.